into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Okay. Oh no, I shouldn't talk like that for this episode. It'll sound like I'm trying to impersonate Wyclef, which is not what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, Jake thinks Haitians sound like Grimace. It's a crude stereotype he believes.
Wait, what does Grimace sound like?
It sounds like Wyclef.
I mean, I was about to do the Cookie Monster voice, but then I realized that's Cookie Monster. That's not Grimace. I don't think he speaks.
And Grimace, I think we all agree, probably sound pretty similar.
I think that's based on stereotypes.
C
I'm not the problem here.
For Cookie. One time. He's in the Fugees. All right.
One is purple, the other's blue. And I believe Cookie Monster's shorter.
Did you know Grimace originally has 4 arms? Have we talked about this on the show?
Like Goro?
Yeah, the original Grimace has 4 arms. It's so he can steal shakes, even though he is a shake.
I have 4 arms. Get it?
Yeah.
My arms. Can we edit that out?
I now sort of get it, but I feel no better for feeling that way.
No, it was a really good joke, actually.
Yeah, let's lead with that.
Yeah, I've got.
It's like the right to bear arms. It's if you say it, it means something else. I have 4
back
arms.
To Grimace.
I have 4 arms.
Grimace had 4 arms, and he would steal shakes with them.
Yeah, much like the United States steals from Latin America and the Caribbean. The United States is
the same.
A global Grimace.
Right, shakes the
global
earth.
Grimace.
Shakes the earth. Shakes sometimes, earthquakes, and we take advantage of that shake to steal from
If
Haiti.
you're following along with your corkboard at home, make sure you connect Earth Shake to Milkshake.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know what? I called it a hurricane. You will see. It was not a hurricane that happened in 2010. It was an earthquake.
I caught that, and I was like, am I wrong? No, it was the earthquake, right?
It was an earthquake.
So,
it's, then this is my trope mind, because I'm thinking, oh, it's tropical, it's Haiti, it's in the Caribbean, must be a hurricane. No, they have earthquakes too.
No.
Not everything is water-related just because they're an island.
It was not.
For us, when you say things, it sounds so confident, we just assume you're right.
Really? That's funny that's how it sounds.
Well, coming
out of me.
You've been broadcasting for a while, so you have that authority in your voice now where you're like the news. And now I just listen to you on our podcast and I learned things from you as if you were the man in the TV. And they could be wrong and make it be dumber. It doesn't matter.
It's like Dan Rather explaining how Grimace's 4 arms are like forearms.
I have 4 arms. Coming up next, later on today, this woman has 4 arms. You know how they jump? Yeah. They do that weird thing with the tone on the news where they're like, I am eating a sandwich right now.
The British, speaking of like the voice of authority, the British can convince you that they don't know what they're talking about because of their accents, but BBC is the weirdest. Sometimes I just listen to BBC for this. They end sentences like this.
Yeah.
No comment from Old Man Jagger.
It appears a pedophile was involved.
Alex, can you turn your gain up?
I'll turn it way up.
Can you gain volume?
I feel like most of the news out of England is pedo-based.
Yeah. Pedos
we
and
did a lot of
nonsense.
America bashing this episode, but let's keep it clear who the real bad guy is. And they're in the soccer cup now.
England, yes.
Kicking the ball.
Well, in this situation, in the Haiti situation, it's really like a lot of France.
Yeah,
and
France.
Some Spain. And also, yes, the United States is not off the hook at all for being a grimace. So, if you haven't caught on yet, we're talking about Haiti today because guess what? American, you didn't even know know about it. Their president was assassinated, which is an insane thing to happen and not be major news.
You're laughing. The president was assassinated and you're laughing.
Yeah, Murray. So, in order to discuss this, I think because we're a largely American audience, you know, and we're assuming a level of stupidity that I know I certainly subscribe to, have. I don't know what a $10 word for saying that is.
Yes.
I'm dumb. I fucking, you know, read up on Haiti like yesterday about because there's gaps, and I, you know, went to a dumb school and I don't know everything about Haiti, and also I have been reading about it on my own because it is interesting. I listen to like Mike Duncan and shit like that.
Right. Well, even in the smart schools, like they don't in Harvard, they probably do teach about Haiti in some way, but it's a very skewed and imperial perspective.
Well, so this is also plays into like, you know, remember last year when we talked about John Brown for fucking 4 or 5 episodes or whatever. One thing I kept talking about was how they don't tell you this in school, and if they do tell you it, they tell you a really specific version of it just by nature of, you know, the whole imperialistic project, yada yada yada. Right. So like, even when if you want to kill an hour and learn some really interesting shit, I would implore anyone to literally sit down and read the Wikipedia history section of Haiti. I swear to God, I did that.
Yeah.
But you have to keep in mind that when you do that, it's heavily slanted in a certain direction, and you can tell like there's a shift when you get to the US involvement specifically, really, where you start to realize that the Wikipedia article is now lying to you or whatever. It moves from like opaque history in the past to like, yeah, we just had to go down there or whatever. But if you have that in mind and you are a big fucking anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, you can see the real story in it, and it is a sufficient. It takes like an hour to read. Like it's enough of it is there, and then you have all the seeds to where you go off and read your own shit. And I implore anyone to do that, or if you have more time, just read a fucking book on it, because the history of Haiti is incredibly tragic and funny, and like I will say yesterday when I was like, oh, the president of Haiti's been assassinated, I was like, that's crazy. After having read about the entire history of presidents and leaders in Haiti, and I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, because there's like been like, I think they said 39 coups in the history of the country. Every leader gets deposed or sent out on a boat or assassinated or whatever. So this is just a continuation of pretty wild shit. Hello, fucking technical difficulties again. This shit happened again. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's happening. Hi, this is Jake. Something garbled the fucking sound on our podcast a little bit right here, so I'm just going to come in and tell you that and then transition into the interview we did with Jemima Pierre. Yeah, this sucks. I don't know what's happening. I literally have never encountered this up until now, where everything we recorded sounded fine, and then we played it back. It has this weird clipping to it. You'll hear it in the outro, because I wasn't able to take it out of that. But we, you know, essentially just talked about the entire history of Haiti and the situation ideologically being that the only successful slave revolt in history turning into a republic, you know, leads to this situation where there's ideological and economical constraints on the place, right? There's history of imperial powers sort of just like squeezing money out of Haiti, and there's this whole situation where France tries to take it back over, but then it can't, but it still is able, in the international community, it's still able to get away with this thing where it just like demands to put Haiti into this insane amount of debt. And that is what you need to understand about Haiti, is that the reason people call it like, oh, it's corrupt and like it's a bad, like it's, you know, it looks historically like it has all these mistakes it's made, and well, it's so poor, and it's like, well, yeah, but it's because of that. and because the United States spent 15 years, imposed on it and essentially did the same thing, and then all this neoliberal shit happened, etc. Yada yada yada. Right now we have like businessmen operating in Haiti from elsewhere. Yada yada yada. God, this sucks. I hate trying to re-explain shit. Also, there's like jokes that got lost. It sucks. There was a president of Haiti at one point who was backed by the United States named Papa Doc Duvalier, who told people he was Baron Samedi, the voodoo priest figure, technically called a Loa, I think. Not a priest, like a god, who's a really cool character I read a lot about this week. He keeps you from becoming a zombie when you die by destroying your bones in the ground or something. He like digs the grave that sends you to hell. It's crazy. It's a figure in a real religion who constantly drinks rum and smokes cigars. This is the coolest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I wanted to talk about it, but the audio got destroyed on my fucking podcast. So, I don't know. We tried our best to set up with context what we're going to be talking about. I think the only other thing you need to know is that there's also this thing going on with this guy named Jimmy Barbecue, who his name is, it's his nickname, and he's like a Vanguard type that is an ex-police officer that is now in charge of. He's been radicalized. He's not a cop anymore, and he's in charge of a union of gangs called G9. 9 gangs. And we're going to talk a little bit about whether he is legitimately going to be some sort of vanguard like Che Guevara type figure, or whether he's just a crazy person, or whether he's a US backed puppet. Who knows? I think that's all you need to know, other than the entire history of Haiti. Well, listen to our guest. She's really smart. She'll explain a lot of it too. Okay, here you go.
Joined by an anthropologist, a professor of Black Studies at University of California, Los Angeles, and an organizer with Black Alliance for Peace, Jemima Pierre. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So I feel like a lot of Americans, myself included, we really only hear about Haiti when something sort of salacious happens, or when there's some like disaster porn we can feel bad about or feel good about giving money to or something.
Or when Wyclef teaches us.
Yeah. There's a huge amount of things that Americans should know because we are unfortunately responsible, our country anyway, our government, responsible for a lot of the issues happening down there. But of course, the president, we're speaking a few days after the president was assassinated, which is, salacious, but an important event as well. But you have been talking about this man's administration for a while now, and there's a lot of interesting stuff with that situation, or situation, if you will. Please excuse. I'm sorry.
More and more we're saying it.
I have a brain disease where it's like Tourette's, but for bad puns. But in all seriousness, it is. There's a lot there that has been going on, and the U.S. has been involved. What can you tell us about who this guy was, the president, and based on the information we have now, I know there's a lot of unknown knowns here. Who you think is responsible for this killing?
Right. So there's a lot to go by, and people have just been ignoring, as you say, ignoring Haiti. And now that the Haitian president has been assassinated, everybody's a Haitian expert, which is funny to me in terms of thinking about mainstream media, CNN and Washington Post and so on. But Jovenal Moïse was the de facto president of Haiti. He's been ruling by decree for about 18 months. He's completely unpopular. His mandate was up, according to the lawyers, the courts, the Constitution. His mandate was up February 7, 2021. He refused to step down. And said that he had one more year. And part of that has to do with the Haitian Constitution that states that the president's term begins the year of the elections, and his elections was marked by irregularities and fraud and all kinds of things. And so they had to do a couple of runoffs. And so then the year that the runoff was 2016, and he didn't take office until the fall of 2016 or the early 2017. But the Constitution says no matter what, the year of the election is the year that his term begins, and so he should step down then. So he was fighting against that. But long before that, he was a president that really ruled without a mandate, right? Because he was handpicked by his predecessor. And there were only about 20 people who participated in voting. So about 12% of the votes he received. And it was, everyone said this was an illegitimate government. And so from the very beginning, there were protests against his presidency. And then later on, a year and a half into his presidency, there was a huge report about corruption among members of his political party, stealing the Petrocaribe funds. And we can talk about the Petrocaribe funds because that's something that involves in Venezuela, right. Aid to Haiti. And it was money. So Petrocaribe was this thing that Hugo Chavez set up for Caribbean nations for development. So when oil prices were high and Venezuela had a lot of oil, it actually provided oil to these nations at very low interest, and said that they didn't have to pay for this oil for 25 years. And these nations would take the money, use the profits from this for development. So this was Petrocaribe. It turns out that his party had embezzled almost $2 billion from the Petrocaribe Fund. So there were protests against him in 2018, 2019. And then he tried, and then of course the U.S. was forcing him and the Caribbean nations not to be part of Petrocaribe because the U.S. has its own anti-Venezuelan politics. And so then the IMF tried to get him to raise oil prices. That sparked another set of protests. And then he tried to change the Constitution last year, a referendum to change the Constitution to basically, Haitian Constitution does not allow more than one term. A president can't hold office more than one term. And so he was trying to do it so that not only could the president hold more than one term, but the presidency had a lot more power, dissolve parliament, put more of the power in the executive board. So there were all these things against him, in addition to all the internal politics of Haiti with the class and color politics of the Haitian elite. And so there's that. So by the time then he gets assassinated, it's obvious that there's, something, it's an internal. People are saying it's the Colombians. A lot of people are saying it's actually not. It's an internal fight within the party. The way, no one else was hurt except for him and his wife. Right? All his security, nobody was shot, nobody was killed. It was just him and his wife. And so people think it's an inside job. And so we wait to see what that's going to be. Now, so that's that's the horrible death spot, right? Jovenal Moïse. And my point though is there's no way that Jovenal Moïse could be who he is, could even get into power without the U.S., the UN, the Organization of American States, and what we have called the core group, which is the self-elected group of representatives who make all decisions about Haiti, right? And so, in terms of thinking about lack of sovereignty. And Jovenal Moïse comes to power because he was hand-selected by Michel Martelly, who started the party in 2010, 2011. And Michel Martelly was actually forced onto the Haitian people by the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State. And so people don't realize this, but this is Obama's legacy in Haiti, leaving us with this terrible party, forcing this Michel Martelly, who actually did not make the first rounds in the elections in 2010, but Hillary Clinton and the Organization of American States flew to Haiti during the Arab Spring and forced this candidate upon the Haitian people, threatened that president with the Rene Preval, then the sitting president, would exile if he didn't accept that. So then this is that legacy. And so this party, this guy was already corrupt. He was a Duvalierist. And so he comes right before Moïse, and he handpicks Moïse. And so part of this is to think about, how it is that we get to here, and to not just focus on this individual, because the structure is still in place, and the structure that allows this Moïse to become president and then be assassinated is still in place. The other thing quickly I want to say, and you can ask questions, is that the last time we had an assassinated president, the last time a Haitian president was assassinated was in 1915, right before the first U.S. occupation of Haiti. And so we have to, and that occupation lasted almost 20 years. And so we have to, so we see the parallels here, and it's just really interesting to think about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's like a Star Wars prequels thing going on. Right. I have so many questions. I don't even know where to start with this. Do we want to start with like the Clinton stuff, or do we want to go before that?
I do want to because the Constitution is an interesting facet of this, because it's not, all constitutions are complicated, but it seems like right now there's not a clear succession for who's going to take over, right? Like, is that accurate? Like the guy who's in power right now, the interim president, there was supposed to be somebody else who got COVID, and it's not clear who technically is supposed to take over. Is that fair to say?
Well, yeah, that's correct. And so part of and this is where you see the meddling of the so-called international community, because it's really the U.S., the UN, the OAS, right? So let's be real here. But the guy who proclaimed himself president was an interim prime minister. It was the sixth prime minister of this government. He's only been in power for 4 years. He's had 6 prime ministers, and the OAS, who's always supported him, came and released a report just last week, saying that we'll support you as long as you have elections, because they want to have elections, make it seem like there's a democracy in Haiti. So the U.S. is all about, let's have these elections, even though, you have a de facto president, even though, there's no parliament, there's no elected officials, everybody there is appointed, right? And so this guy was appointed in April as an interim prime minister. And